Then suddenly Ilan asked if they knew if Lord Clement had a fiancée. Ariel was surprised and asked what it would affect. The boy said he had good looks and a bright, promising future. He was surprised and asked if he meant to say that if he brought a bride with connections into the house, she would help Eris in becoming a lady, and with the debut itself. Ilan replied that it was exactly like that. Then he said maybe he would bring home a beautiful woman and say, "This is your future sister-in-law. Look at her and learn." Ariel thought that couldn't happen. He's such an avid workaholic. Then suddenly she pictured this guy, how he was asking to say hello because they would soon be family. Ariel thought she could imagine him even with a desk, but no way at all with a woman. Eris screamed and said that she would bet everything on him dying alone. Ilan laughed and asked if he didn't want to give his brother to anyone. The girl got angry and told him not to dare ever say such nonsense again. Then the guy said, maybe she's jealous that he can get married first. Eris got angry and swooped straight at Ilan, asking if he was bullying now. Albion was quietly collecting papers at this time and didn't pay any attention to them. After that, he simply got up from the table and left. The fight continued for a few more minutes. After that, Ilan shouted that he was giving up, and said that his opponent was still just as strong. He still couldn't believe he was a woman now. Eris said he was as strong as ever, and that pleased him. After pausing for a bit, Ilan asked, "In that case, is he going to compete next month?" Ariel interjected, "Does he mean the one to be held in Castra?" Ariel said that she was sure Lord Clement and Prince Khalsa would be thrilled if he participated in a vulgar contest like this. Ilan added that Kendrick would be disappointed. The girl was surprised and now asked, "Does Kendrick Logan, that bear, really want to fight her?" Ilan replied that he thought the one was looking forward to fighting him in the competition. He heard that the one stays with the Silver Briar until he defeats her. Said that at this rate he would use her as an excuse when he was dying of old age, if she was now his excuse for staying on the job. Ilan said that's excellent because she's basically giving him a job for the rest of his life. The girl said he wasn't a rival, she was a human, and he was a bear. They were different species. "Okay," she asked. "Wasn't she a bear?" The girl asked, "Does he really want to taste her fist again?" After a little silence, Ilan said that in any case he thought she would take part in the competition. When the girl asked why, she explained that if he had been with her, he would have won his victory speech as well. He would have said to his savior, "Look at me, what I have become." Ariel asked, hadn't he told her not to tell anyone about Edward? Ilan replied that he had said so because he might get in trouble if he wandered off without his orders. He told her to think how cool it would be, the kid he'd saved 7 years ago in the middle of nowhere. Now a royal knight beating everyone in the competition, she would be the main character in the story. Eris thought about it and said that sounded pretty cool. Ilan agreed with her, saying that even if she didn't say his name, she still wanted to compete. Ilan asked all the time about it. Then the girl said that she had already told him no, hadn't she? Then keeps insisting on it. Does he want to make her angry? Ilan, hearing this, got very upset and said that's why she's becoming. Let her not be angry. The girl stroked his head and said that she really did act like a puppy sometimes. Ilan interjected why it was like a puppy, but the girl said it was just a compliment and laughed. In fact, Ariel really wants to go in search of Sir Edward, just like Ilan said. She wants to show that she has grown up to be a good person, and also to thank him for saving her. She wants to meet him and say all this, to show him that his efforts were not in vain. Ilan looked at the girl in a mysterious voice and said, "Lady Ariel?" The girl was surprised and asked why he called her that. Ilan explained that because she didn't look like herself at all, just like she had then. He didn't recognize him. Eris was surprised and said how could that be? Because now he had even changed his clothes. Ilan hesitated and said that, well, he didn't even know how that could have happened. He asked, maybe it was because he saw her in a dress and a wig? Ariel asked, and did he really not recognize her then? Did she really look like a real girl then? Ilan said that even Albion had agreed with that afterward. The guy said she really did look like the lady he had met for the first time, not the usual Eris. The girl laughed and thanked him for that. After that she stood up and said that she would go then. Ilan was surprised and asked, didn't he want to practice today? Eris replied that he wanted to, but he suddenly remembered something important. Eris turned and told the man to tell him that he would be skipping class for a while. After that, Ariel left. The girl immediately returned to the mansion. She ran into the kitchen and turned to Sally, holding her wig in her hands. The maid was startled and replied that dinner wasn't ready yet. The maid turned to Ariel and asked, "Perhaps she should call her young master? Have her quickly tell me how she should be addressed." Ariel asked, "Should the maid care?" Sally said that if she didn't tell her, she would be left without snacks. The girl was very upset, so she put on her wig and said that today was Ariel's day. Asked if she was going to be a country girl until she was fully trained in manners. She saw that it was right. Sally was a country girl too. Ariel then sat down on one knee and asked if she would like to go out with her. Sally was surprised and was silent for a while. She then looked at the girl and said that she could, of course, and asked why the girl had decided to invite her so unexpectedly, and wasn't she now in the character of Ariel? The girl rose from her knee and said that she, as Ariel Decius, had not yet made her debut in the social world, which meant that no one knew her yet. And Prince Carl would definitely not be walking around Castra at a time like this. Sally realized that she understood now. Then the girl went on and said that they wouldn't just wander around. She wanted to find out about her curse, and if they were lucky, they could buy her a voice-changing potion. Sally exhaled and asked again. She just needed to be shown the town. Then she would agree to be her guide. The maid said they would have dinner outside the house because she was sick of cooking. Ariel asked if she was being too honest. The maid replied maybe she would try to cook something herself then. After that, the girls went to the market in town. The girl who was selling the food beckoned to the customers, saying that it was just picked from the garden. She also said they have pickled radishes that go with everything. Shall we move on? Yes. We saw some man arguing with a blade seller. The buyer asked if he didn't say he had connections at the mine where he could now get the metal he promised him. Ariel was amazed when she saw it all. She thought this place was very different from the Castra she knew. Suddenly, as she was looking around, some guy bumped into her. When he came to, he apologized to her, calling her Miss. From that point on, she thought, apparently she would never be recognized, and today she would spend the day as a normal Castra person. Then all of a sudden, as she passed another food tray, Sally called out to a girl and told her to look, because apparently there was about to be a fight. Some guy asked the other guy who he was to stop a regular person shopping. Does he even know what house he's from? The other guy replied that he didn't have to know. Then the blonde-haired guy asked, so he's stopping just for no reason? He has to. The other answered that it was right. The girls stood and watched all this. The guy said that Silver Spike's main mission is to protect ordinary citizens. Ariel recognized the guy, believing it was Kendrick. Kendrick said the market is a place for traders and buyers. If he is not one of them, let him leave the place. This protested and asked if he meant to say he wasn't a customer. He was actually going to buy a whole case of liquor for the Count. Kendrick said he threatened the merchants with the name of the Count he works for, threatening them with reprisal. He sought to get a price that would suit him. The guy was a little scared because it was true, but he said it wasn't all true, and he just wanted to buy alcohol. At this moment, the shouts of the crowd were heard shouting for the one to stop lying, because this was the 10th district where the commoners lived. Ariel figured there was no way he would have been able to buy alcohol for the Count in this place for any amount of money. The blonde-haired guy looked around as the crowd started yelling at him. Suddenly, Kendrick told him to come with them, because they needed to check out who he was working for. But at that moment, the guy mimicked his words. Ariel figured this wasn't going to end well. He'd crossed the line. One of Kendrick's assistants wanted to pounce on the customer and asked him what he said. Have him say it again. But Kendrick stepped between them and told them to calm down and stop. Taking advantage of the moment, the guy immediately started pushing the crowd away with his hands and running away. Ariel saw him run past them, so she decided to help and tripped him up. The customer, who was running at a high rate of speed, didn't see her foot and hooked up, falling to the pavement. Ariel took her maid's hand and told her they had to run away. The maid didn't understand what was happening. Kendrick, who saw all of this, shouted out to them for her to wait for the girl who had helped them. Let her stop, but Ariel kept running. After a while, the girls stopped. Sally stood against the wall to catch her breath, and Ariel looked around to see if he was following them. After taking a little breather, the maid asked why they ran away. Ariel said it was just that the man didn't like Aristides very much. Sally was surprised and asked what the problem was, since she was Ariel now. The girl answered that she was just afraid that he might recognize her. The maid was surprised and asked if she was serious because even Prince Charles and her friends didn't recognize her as Ariel. The girl said she was wrong because Albion recognized. But their conversation was interrupted by a man walking past them. Ariel turned around, and the man looked straight at her and winked. The girl didn't understand what was going on. Then Sally said that apparently they were in the 11th district. Ariel, hearing this, said that it was now clear why the atmosphere there was completely different. After that, the girls looked around and Ariel asked, "So this is the 11th district?" The neighborhood was dirty and unkept, and so were the people. They were tired and empty. The capital city of Castra is divided into 15 administrative districts. The first district is the Royal Palace. That's where the score began, of course. The royal family also bewails the city as the beautiful peacock that spread its tail. All the best neighborhoods for upper-class people are below the 7th district, and visible boundaries begin to appear from the 8th. They look like a maze. Ariel remembered that her brother had warned her not to go to this neighborhood. At the time, she'd thought it was just the usual aristocrat scarecrows. She realized that he must not have lied to her. Sally interrupted her thoughts and said that she could say they were lucky. Ariel was surprised and asked why. The maid explained that there were a lot of fortune-tellers in the neighborhood. Ariel suggested that they go the other way first. At that moment, a woman was watching the girls, but they didn't notice. After a while, Ariel and her maid came to a place called a hospital, but they didn't get what they wanted there, so they walked right out. They were met by a man at the exit and asked if they wanted medication that would make their voices worse. But Ariel told him to get away from them. The girl was shocked that just when they heard about the witch, they immediately kicked out to the brothel and tried to sell strange potions. Sally agreed with her and said that it probably wouldn't work yet. Ariel suggested maybe going to another neighborhood, but then suddenly a woman appeared in front of them and asked if they were looking for a strange medicine. Ariel immediately assumed a fighting stance and asked who she was. The woman said she should be worried too, because she was the one who should be worried. Ariel asked, "And why should she be the one to worry?" The woman said she knew about the real cure they were looking for. The woman said it was made by a witch. Ariel was very surprised and said she had bought it from a recognized pharmacist and asked if that meant anything. The woman explained that one stroke of the king had branded this pharmacist a witch. She thought it was like that, for she herself had claimed him, and now she could no longer pack her medicine from him. When the woman asked if it was true, Ariel got angry and said it was nonsense. The woman laughed and asked, "She's not going to hit the old woman, is she?" After that, she told the girl to calm down because she was only checking them out. Turning around, she told them to follow her. When Ariel asked what she meant, the woman replied that she would give them what they were looking for. Let them just follow her. The girls just looked at each other. After that, they shouted in one voice for her to wait for them. All three of them were walking down dark alleys. Ariel wondered where they were going. "What are you talking about all of a sudden?" the woman asked, and asked how much they were willing to pay. Ariel was surprised and asked if she wasn't the one who should name the price. The woman replied that of course. After all, the goods are very limited in quantity and in good demand. Then Ariel said that so be it. They were willing to pay 15 gold pieces. The woman said, "I see. Then that would be 80 gold pieces." The girl asked again, and said that maybe she would repeat herself. She seemed to have misheard a little. Then the old woman laughed and said that she had already charged them 90 gold pieces. Ariel didn't understand what was wrong with this old woman. At this point, she took Sally's hand and told her they were leaving because they wouldn't be buying it. But then suddenly a man appeared right in front of Ariel and asked where they were going so fast maybe they'd listen to the end. Then suddenly there came the voice of an old woman, and she said that it was 100 gold pieces, and she would not raise the price anymore. Ariel. At that moment I thought she was being sneaky. She must have intended to undress them in the first place. At that moment one of the men touched Ariel's face and said that if they didn't have enough, she could pay the rest with her body. If she does a good job with her mouth, maybe he'll pay for it. At that moment, Ariel thought that in her hometown, these men had already been stripped naked and sent into the woods to be killed by boars. But she figured if the boars weren't here, she'd be fine. When she wanted to hit the man, she heard Sally's voice yelling for help. The girl asked for someone to help them at least, but preferably, of course, a handsome knight. Ariel turned to her and asked her what she was doing. Sally said she had always wanted to say it, but then suddenly there was a man's voice asking if she really thought anyone would come to rescue them. The other agreed with him and said that handsome knights don't help girls who came to this place themselves. Ariel thought what idiots they are. Because she is this handsome knight, the girl thought she would punch the idiot in the stomach first. But then suddenly someone beat her to it and threw the guy against the wall. His partner asked who he was. At that moment another voice said he was the Knight of the Silver Spike, Kendrick Logan, and he's there to protect the weak. Ariel didn't realize what Kendrick was doing here. When the other man wanted to do something to Kendrick, he grabbed his arm, and then you got his shoulders back so it started to crunch. The bully shouted for him to stop because he was hurt. The knight threw him aside. The old woman and the man didn't understand what was happening. They shouted with one voice that they should run away before it was too late, leaving their partner alone. But the blonde wasn't going to stay there either, so he shouted for them to wait for him and started to run away. Kendrick just stood there watching the whole thing. Ariel, who was standing behind him, thought that physique really did matter. At that moment Kendrick turned to her and asked if they had hurt themselves. Sally gets embarrassed and says it's okay and they're fine. Ariel is afraid to even look him in the eye because she thinks he might recognize her. When she got back from him, she thanked him for his help and told him they had to go. Then she took Sally's hand and started to walk away. But then suddenly Kendrick walked up to her and grabbed her arm, stopping her, asking if she was the one who had accidentally helped him the other day. Ariel thought, did he really recognize her? And immediately blurted out, saying he was mistaken. It wasn't her. The man, hesitating, replied that he was definitely sure it was she who had helped him at the 10th District Market. She said that it was definitely her after all, and she thought that she must have been worried for nothing. Suddenly Kendrick spoke and said that thanks to her the guy couldn't leave, and he wanted to thank her, but he didn't expect the girl to run away. When he saw that the girl was in pain because he was squeezing her hand, he let go and apologized, saying that apparently he had overdone it a bit. The guy said it might sound like a silly excuse, but it gets a lot rougher in alleys like this. So once again he apologized to her. At this point Ariel wondered, wasn't he always a rough bear? But then suddenly Kendrick asked, if they didn't mind, could he walk them to the exit? Ariella was about to say there was no need, and they were on their own. But then suddenly Sally interrupted her and blurted out that of course he could walk them out. Ariel spoke in a whisper. The maids asked, what is she doing? Because if that man is around them, he will definitely recognize her. Of course, she replied. He won't recognize her. At least they would be able to walk out of the neighborhood in peace. Sally said, let her just imagine how many more scumbags they might meet along the way. Ariel had no choice, so she agreed. As they started on their way, Kendrick said that he didn't know what they were looking for there, but it was best not to go in that neighborhood. Even if they made a deal with a good merchant, he would still try to ditch them or rob them. He said it's very unsafe there in their day, especially for girls. Sally asked what he was doing here then. Knight explained that he was on his way home, but he heard her scream. The girl laughed and replied that he had a very good ear. Kendrick smiled and replied that it was one of his few talents. Ariel had no idea that the bear who constantly challenges her to a duel could save strange girls and be so sweet and polite. Maybe he only hates her. But that's not fair. After all, she hadn't even done anything to him. When they came a little way, and he led them down some alleyway, he said that from that place they could get home safely. He said that if something happens, let them call his name. Although he wasn't an aristocrat, no one would want to make an enemy of a true knight. Sally replied that it was okay because she had an aristocrat by her side. Kendrick was surprised and said that he sincerely apologized for being very rude to her. Ariel replied that he didn't need to apologize because he'd already helped them today, and they'd be more careful, so they probably wouldn't see each other again. Kendrick said it wasn't them who needed to be careful, but the bandits who would dare attack her. Ariel was surprised and asked how he could make such a promise without knowing when she would call him. The boy replied that she was basically right. Asked, do they come here often? Ariel replied that they don't, and they probably won't meet again. Kendrick said it was a dangerous place for a lady. Ariel agreed with him and said she wasn't usually in places like this. Yeah, he wasn't leaving, and she didn't understand what the problem was, what he wanted. When Sally whispered to the girl that since he had saved the noblewoman, he was waiting for her to give him his reward, Ariel was surprised and thought she had nothing to give. She didn't bring anything with her. At this point she pulled a small picture of a leaf out of her purse and told him to take at least this one. Kendrick took it in his hands and asked how he could accept such a jewel. Ariel replied that she had bought it at the market, and if he kept it, she would repay him later for today. The guy was surprised and asked if she was serious then. Ariel asked if maybe he didn't want an award. Kendrick was very surprised that she wanted to give him an award because he just wanted to hear her name. Ariel thought that nothing would happen if she said her name. So she called, "What's her name?" Kendrick turned to Lady Ariel and asked if he could recognize her last name. The girl thought that was a bit much. Then she turned away from him and said that she couldn't name her yet, but she promised to tell him the next time they met. She then took Sally's hand and said that, and now it was time for them to go. Knight said that he hoped they would meet again. When evening came, the girls were already in a more or less safe neighborhood. They sat down on a bench to rest for a while. Ariel said she couldn't get the words of the grandmother out of her head. Asked, "How did you even know what they were looking for? So you asked if they would report her?" Ariel said that apparently there were people who were convicted, even if they weren't witches. Sally said that if you think about it that way, even that fortune teller was afraid of being recognized as a witch, even though she should have been afraid of witches. Then Ariel said that she'd decided that instead of looking for voice-altering drugs, she needed to learn more about the neighborhood. Sally, they should be getting back by now, and said that Mr. Clement would be back soon. Well, Ariel replied that she had faith that the maid would figure something out. Sally said that this was just the last time because her excuses were running out. It was already night and Ariel was still walking around that neighborhood. She was surrounded by drunk people who were either asleep or barely on their feet. Suddenly a man who was driving a wagon passed by her. She thought she felt in her heart that she should question him, but with her head she knows it's best not to get involved in the neighborhood. Because in her hometown it was okay for hungry kids to pick up the carcass of a dead bear. Suddenly she heard the voice of children. When she looked to the side, she saw someone's body being carried out of an apartment. A little boy was shouting for his brother to be returned to him. Ariel shouted in their direction and asked what they were doing there. The girl covered the boy's mouth with her hand at that moment. People who haven't gotten off on each other know if she does. "Who is she?" Answered that this is the first time she's seen her. When Ariel got closer to them and heard a distinctly foul odor, she realized they were most likely picking up a corpse. At that moment, the boy jumped out of the girl's arms and ran up to the body and hugged it, shouting, "Bring back my brother!" The man who was holding the stretcher told someone to get that child out of there already. A girl came up to the boy and said that they would fix him up and bring him back. But the boy, all in tears, said that he knew his brother was dead. They must leave him at home or the curse would spread. The stretcher bearer said he didn't have time to deal with these kids. Ariel realized they were family. She on the stretcher, their brother, it turns out. Suddenly she thought the little boy had said something about a curse. She thought that until she asked, she wouldn't know. So she had to act. She approached the porter and asked if he could bring her up to speed on what was going on. The man was surprised and asked if he could give her all the money too. Ariel thought they certainly lacked politeness, so she swung around and slapped him on the cheek. When the guy was on the ground, she said she would ask again what was going on there. The stretcher bearer said they were busy treating him. Ariel asked, "Is he a doctor?" She said not at all, they were just folk healers. Ariel asked if he was sure he wasn't lying, but the man said he swore on his life that he wasn't. But then suddenly a wagon pulled up to them, driven by him. Asked, "How long are they going to linger with one corpse?" Everyone present was shocked. Then Ariel turned to the porter and said that they were crooks. The girl immediately started to run away. Ariel jumped towards her to make her stop, but then suddenly a man took her by the stomach and told her to run and he would hold this girl back. The girl ran up to the wagon and got into it. The man who was there asked what had happened, but she said she would explain later and let him go. When the wagon started to pull away, the girl looked out of it and asked if it would catch up with them. Ariel thought she had lost her mind. Then she turned around looking for something to throw. Looking at the stretcher, she saw an iron stick. She walked over to the stretcher and pulled out a stick. Then she swung and threw it, shouting for her to catch it. The girl saw an iron stick flying at them, and thought it was a woman who was a true lunatic. On the handles flew over the heads of those seated and crashed straight into the lantern above them. The horse immediately became very frightened and threw everyone sitting down. Ariel thought she had a great shot, but then suddenly the guards came running up to them and asked the girl what they were making a ruckus in the middle of the night. And in the end it all, starting the comedy, ended with the arrival of the guards. As Ariel had thought, The trio were just ordinary crooks posing as folk healers. When they got to the station, the guards started questioning everyone. Ariel sat there and watched. One of the guards said he thought they were working for a witch, but the wagon driver was surprised and asked why they would do that. Of course they don't. Then the guard asked what they were collecting the corpses for. The man said that they are usually used for training and some people even collect them. Then the guard said that it all made sense. So they supply corpses to witches, and they have committed the most serious crime. Ariel didn't understand what was going on there. Then the wagon driver said that they didn't work for the witch, and if necessary, he could name the people who bought corpses from them. At this moment, the man who was carrying the stretcher shouted out that even the Magic Academy was their client. The guard said that the Magic Academy was under divine protection. How dare he even dare belittle her to a witch's level? Their existence will be determined after the sun rises. They will end up in a graveyard or a field. In the meantime, let them be thrown in jail. Another guard came up to them and replied that everything would be done. The driver of the wagon began to shout that it was all a mistake and they were not working for the witch. But no one listened to them anymore. Ariel still didn't understand what was going on here. Suddenly another guard came up to them and addressed the captain, saying that now that they had found the people involved with the witch, should they report it to the royal vine to be taken away? Ariel didn't understand why they should report it to the royal vine. Answered that of course because they were told that anyone involved with witches was to be sent to them. The captain asked who to notify, maybe send a letter to. The guard replied that it was unnecessary paperwork, and asked if the person with the highest rank could do it himself. The captain said no, of course not, because they would just ask, and those would then take away all their credit. But at that moment, he looked to the side, and saw that someone was eavesdropping on them. He saw the release and said that he had completely forgotten about the lady informer. Afterwards he thanked her and told her that she should not visit such places, especially at night. Ariel at this point thought she should try harder and get more information out. She apologized to them then, saying that she was having a hard time digesting her dinner and decided to take a walk. Ariel thought she had to play dumb to make the plan work well and asked, what would happen to those people? The captain replied that they were cheating ordinary citizens, and the Knights of the Royal Vine would punish them for that. He asked if the lady knew about them. Ariel blurted out that of course she did, and she thought they would be perfect as a decoration for the gate. The captain said it was certainly an unusual use, but their main focus was witch hunts, so she needn't worry. Then she asked, what's in it for her? I mean, she almost caught those crooks herself. The captain said of course, but they were the ones who arrested them. Ariel asked then. Their royal vine hadn't done anything either. The captain didn't understand what she was trying to accomplish now. Ariel wondered if she had gone overboard. Then she said that her brother was a knight too. Simple as that. At this point the guards thought she probably just wanted to brag about her brother. The captain said that's really cool. Have her take it and be sure to share it with him and tell him to practice more. Ariel, when she looked at what he had given her, thanked him for the food, and thought that apparently she wouldn't learn anything else. The captain said she could go home now, and the man would escort her out. Ariel thought that if they did get them to the royal vine, she could find out the rest of the information there. After that, she and the guard went home together. When they entered the grounds of the beautiful manor, he asked if they were on the right path. Ariel replied that yes, that's right, and they don't have much left. The guard said that she was an aristocrat. The girl thought that if she was an aristocrat, she should be treated differently. Then she turned to him and said that it was already safe here, so he could go back. The guard said okay and asked if she could give him her address. The girl was surprised and asked why. Then the guard explained that it was to tell her how today's incident had ended. Ariel asked if she would get her reward then. The guard laughed and said that she had already gotten her reward. She remembered that they had given her a small piece of food, and wondered if that was what they called a reward. The guard said they couldn't hand over any more, but maybe they could do something for her personally in the future. So just let her give her address. The girl crouched down and picked up the stone, thinking that this guard was kind of annoying and that it would be better to confuse him. Then she began to write something on the ground with this stone. When she finished, she said it was her address, so let her memorize it. The guard thanked her. When the girl was done, she stood up and said she had to go now. The guard wanted them to check if he had memorized her address correctly, but the girl ignored his request and told him to be more careful on the way back. After that, she ran to the manor. When Ariel wanted to go into the room, she heard someone's voice behind her. It was her brother. He said, wondering if she had finally decided to come back. Ariel tried to calm down and asked why he was still awake. The guy replied that she not only lacked manners, but also minimal respect for those she lived with. Ariel apologized and said she didn't even have anything to say. Her brother sighed and began pulling some kind of envelope out of his robe pocket, saying that tomorrow she was having a tea party with the Countess of Limpton. Ariel was shocked. She asked how it was. She hadn't even gotten ready for tomorrow yet. Her brother told her not to worry. After all, they still had time. He said he'd give her a book in the morning, let her read it, and in the afternoon they would rehearse their social manners. He put his hand on her shoulder and told her that she should get a good night's sleep first. Ariel wondered how she would remember all this in such a short time. She thought she found it difficult to even just read books, not to mention reading comprehension. Her brother moved closer to her and asked if she could handle it. Ariel replied that of course she could handle it, but she thought to herself that orders were orders. She had no choice. She said that if that was all, she would go to bed now. But the guy stopped her and asked her if she wanted to say a word about why she had come so late. Ariel, who was about to open the door and walk into the room, stopped and said, "Right." She had brought him something. At that moment she put a piece of food in his hand. He, when he looked at it, was very surprised and asked where she had even been all this time. Ariel replied that she was helping those in need, and they gave her a treat and asked her to share with him. After that she went into her room and closed the door. Exhaled. She was glad she was finally alone. After that, the girl looked at the invitation and wondered about this tea party. She hoped there would be no knights there. When it was late at night, Ariel's brother came to her room and sat beside her. He watched his half-sister sleep peacefully and quietly. This the boy whispered and apologized to her. Ariel opened her eyes and saw her brother walking away. But the girl really wanted to sleep, so she immediately closed her eyes and fell back asleep. When morning came, Sally came running into Ariel's room. I said it was time to get up because it was morning. The maid brought something along with her. When the relay got up, she was very surprised and asked if it was her imagination or if she was still asleep. Sally said she thought she should shut up. When Ariel got out of bed, Sally said she needed a quick breakfast. After that, it was time to study. Sitting the girl down at the table, the maid said that Mr. Clement had asked her to make her study. Ariel, when she saw what had been prepared, said it all looked quite tasty. But at that moment Sally put Ariel's textbook in front of her outraged and said they don't even let her eat properly. Afterward, the girl looked out the window and asked, "Is that her brother going to work?" But Sally said that Mr. Clement had left at dawn and suggested that perhaps they might be visitors. Ariel wondered how these could be guests and who could be visiting them at this hour. But when the girls looked out the window, Ariel said that it was Albion. She was very surprised at that. She said, "I think there is something wrong here." So she asked Sally to go out to him and find out everything. At that moment, Ariel stood watching them through the window. But Albion said something shocking to the maid. So the maid immediately ran back and turned to Ariel. The maid said to the girl, "Let her be honest, she killed someone. You stole a goat on someone else's property again." Ariel was surprised and said she didn't do anything. What happened at all? Sally asked, "So then why was she shown a document that the crime agency was looking for her?" The Crime Investigation Agency deals with various incidents and accidents in Castra. They seem unusual to Ariel and Sally because in their towns, lynchings of criminals came instead. Ariel first met them 2 years ago, when she broke the leg of a delivery boy who was trying to scam Sally. That's when she'd gotten a big kick out of them, and her brother. From that moment on, the girl tried not to quarrel with the authorities anymore. Ariel was shocked. She asked the maid, "Why exactly did Albion come after her?" Sally told her to think faster about what she might have done. Ariel replied that she hadn't done anything, but then she suddenly thought that maybe she had after all. After that, the girl quickly packed up and walked out to Albion, who walked into the manor. When he got close to her, or he wanted to kiss her hand, she immediately took it away and asked, "Is he crazy? Let him act normal." The guy bowed and said he wasn't, he was just playing along. After that he told them to sit down and talk. They walked to the living room and sat down on the couch. Albion immediately asked what she had done last night. Ariel replied that she was asleep. The guy wasn't satisfied with that answer. and he said that he would now rephrase it so that she would understand what he meant. Albion then asked what she did yesterday between weekdays and evenings. The girl hesitated, and then told them to leave those games. Albion agreed and said so be it. He would start first and said he had gotten a strange message from the guards. They said they had captured the witch's minions last night, and wanted to attribute this accomplishment to the royal vine, except for one loose end. They said there was a witness who saw everything from start to finish, and that they should confirm what happened. Ariel said that means so. The witness must say that it was the royal vine that captured the witch's minions. Albion said that's correct. But there's one problem. They can't find the witness because when they went to her address, the girl wasn't there. Ariel laughed and said maybe they had the wrong address. Then she asked, "What brought Albion to her?" The guy replied that he had gathered the testimony of the guards. "Looks like she's that witness. A tall woman in her 20s with sweeping brown hair who thinks the royal vine is a door ornament." Then he turned to Ariel and said, "To tell him everything that happened last night. He can't trust the guards." Ariel said she caught the witch's servants. Albion replied, "Which is good. Things are finally starting to clear up." Ariel said that the people she had caught were just frauds pretending to be healers. They had nothing to do with witches. The guards continued to insist that it was her they were working for. Albion said apparently they wanted to give the royal vine a reason to brag. He said that's a tough one. Ariel said they were sent to track down a real witch, but they failed miserably. So the prince had completely lost faith in them. The girl laughed, but Albion replied that it wasn't funny. He said anyway, "I had a public order officer come in this morning and explain the situation. He was told to show it if the witness was a commoner to intimidate her. The Armenian said that if the witness belonged to a higher class, he was ordered to come to an amicable solution. Said she also wondered why they wanted her address. So they wanted to intimidate her. She thought he'd come to serenade her under her window. Albion said he was told to do so if he couldn't convince her. The girl laughed and asked if he was a good singer. Puzzled, he replied that he had never tried it. So he wasn't sure. But conviction isn't about singing. It's about a certain attitude. That suddenly Ariel felt some excitement again, and her heart began to beat faster. She thought, "Is this happening again?" The girl didn't understand what was happening to her heart. Then Albion interrupted her musings and said that he would ask her right here and now. Would she testify that the royal vine had caught the witch's minions? The girl winked at him and said, "Ariel Decius will shamefully keep his mouth shut." The girl said she would not testify that the royal vine had made the arrest, but she would also not say a word about seeing the witch's minions. Albion thanked her for her cooperation, and said they shouldn't be praised for something they didn't do. Ariel agreed with him and said they should send the crooks straight to court. Albion then asked how it was that she knew they weren't who they said they were. Ariel said that she had met quite a few fake doctors in her hometown, so she was used to it. Real doctors fell under the monopoly of the powerful, so there were a lot of pretenders, the girl explained to him. Albion said it must have been a difficult time for everyone, but she replied that it wasn't that bad. Luckily, her village had plenty of medicinal herbs, and there was a healer there who tried her best to help. She was even able to fix a boy who had almost torn his ankle off. Albion, when he heard, said it was amazing. Ariel said that many died, but those who survived also had a hard time. She never thought she would be welcomed into the Marquis's family. Albion said that she had become not only a knight, but a lady, and that the clothes really suited her. Ariel asked if it did and said it was such a relief. But Clement, that suddenly the girl stopped with U-terms and conceived what she had just said about the healer and Clemente, the way a woman would speak. Zero Peony didn't look surprised at all, and I thought, does he think she's changing her manner of speech to fit the role of lady? Or was Clement right after all? Albion knew she was a woman from the beginning. Then Ariel told him to be honest with her and asked, "Is he aware of that?" Albion didn't understand and asked what exactly it was. Thought it. Stupid, of course, but she should ask. There was still a chance he didn't know she was a woman. Then she said she meant what he suspected. He said it was an inappropriate question. Let her not ask such things. So vague. Doesn't want them to get a complicated idea. Knowing what someone else is thinking without saying a word is only possible in books. Ariel said she knew that, and thought to herself, this is Albion, so everything must be okay. When the girl wanted to say that in truth, she was immediately interrupted. Clement came into their room and addressed his sister. Ariel turned and saw her brother. Then she asked why he was back so early. The boy explained that he had taken the afternoon off. When he asked what it was she was doing alone with this rascal, what was going on between the two of them, Ariel was surprised and asked Clement what the memory had taken away. Albion was her co-worker. Her brother really wondered why a co-worker asked who she was now. Ariel realized what he was talking about. Then the girl said she was Ariel Decius. Albion suddenly stood up and said that the negotiations regarding last night had reached an impasse. Albion said he would see her then, meaning he asks her to give the arrest deed to Decius, to see him next time, and also wishes him a good day, Lady Ariel. Albion thanked them for making him feel so welcome, despite the sudden visit. Then he bade them farewell and left. Element pleased told his sister that she didn't like him. Afterward, he asked if they had talked about anything in particular. Ariel replied that they hadn't, and thought they might have if he'd come back a little later. Then she turned to her brother and asked why he was back so early. He'd really taken the day off. Clement said that he had told her yesterday that she would study theory in the morning and practice and prepare for the tea party in the afternoon. The girl was surprised and asked if they had had such a conversation. Then she asked if Clement had ever organized a tea party before. The man replied that he had not, so he called some experts who would be arriving soon. Ariel ran to the window and said she could hear them coming. Then she saw through the window several carriages pulling up to their estate. When she saw that the carriage wasn't ending, she asked her brother how many experts he had even invited. A total of 3 carriages arrived. A tailor from the atelier was in the first carriage. A fashion designer came out of the second carriage with various cosmetics and jewelry. And the third carriage brought her etiquette teacher. She was a rather stern-looking woman, not the prettiest. After that, Ariel began to learn etiquette. She tried to greet as she should at a tea party. The girl bowed, thanked for the invitation, and said she was Ariel from the house of Decius. But her teacher said that such a cocky expression on her face was no good, especially if her first social event was a tea party. Ariel replied that she would correct herself and pay more attention. She wondered how many hours it had been. Honestly, she thought it would be easier to train in the order. When the teacher looked at her, she said she shouldn't worry. Ariel didn't understand why she said that. The teacher then explained that tea parties are held to pass the time in a carefree manner while enjoying the aroma of tea. Ariel is required to introduce herself and behave appropriately when greeting or escorting others. The teacher explained that Lord Clement wasn't asking for more from her. Ariel asked if it was true because she said so, but she didn't really finish the sentence, and thought she felt as if he would disown her if she would dishonor him. So she asked what her brother had told her. The teacher said he hadn't said anything bad about her. He only asked her to teach her, on a level, enough to feel confident at the tea party. At his own request, she had also invited a fashion designer. The teacher said that Ariel has lived a life away from high society. Her powerful shoulders and the scars on her body proving that she has lived a life to be proud of. She said they are so nearly the reason she feels uncomfortable walking into another person's home without knowing proper etiquette. The teacher said that they would only help her as much as she wished. She said that if this lesson was difficult, it meant that they had put a lot of effort into it. The teacher said Ariel is just amazing. She believes the girl will hear a lot of good things at tomorrow's tea party, and also hoping the girl was thinking the exact same thing. Ariel thanked her. It was already evening. When the girl finished with all her classes, she came to the banquet hall to have a little snack. At this point, someone came running in with food in hand and told her it was a great job. The maid came with plenty of food, and Ariel thanked her for it. After that, she began her meal. Sally was very surprised to see Ariel not eating as enthusiastically as usual. She asked why she wasn't eating with such an appetite. Ariel, wiping her mouth with a napkin, said that she didn't want everything she'd learned to be for nothing, and asked what that meant. Sally said that Lord Clement was on his way to see her. Ariel, when she heard this, immediately started eating quickly, already forgetting her manners. After a while, Clement came to her and asked how her lesson had gone. Ariel replied that everything was fine. The last teacher was especially wonderful. Her brother interjected truthfully, and said she was well known. Then Ariel asked if Clement was rich. The boy asked what she was talking about. Ariel said the fashion designer left a lot of jewelry, saying he had already paid for it. She said there was so much of it that it would be a little keepsake for her. Clement said that a woman of Decius's house could not be so meager, and if she had come as a lady from the beginning, she would have more, much more. Ariel was surprised that it was only a minimum. Then she asked if the Knights of the Royal Vine would be attending the tea party. She told Albion why she was pretending to be a woman. She doesn't want to have to explain it to others as well. Clement said that she might not worry. There would be mostly women there, and even if some blind fool bothered her under the pretext of looking for a bride, it was very unlikely that it would be one of the Knights of the Royal Vine. Ariel asked why he was so sure of that. Her brother explained that it was because tomorrow the Order of the Royal Vine would be invited to another event. The first prince will attend the initiation at the High Priest of the 7th District, and the Royal Vine will accompany him for protection. Clement said she could only meet them if she came to the relay enlightenment. She said she understood, but she thought he could have told her about it sooner. She had to worry for no reason. Then suddenly she turned to her brother and said that this might sound a little strange, but she asked if he would go with her. The girl was uncomfortable in Clement's presence, but it was better to be around him than alone with highly ordered ladies she hadn't met before. Her brother smiled and said that he'd already told her that it would be mostly women there, and he hadn't asked her to make friends there. Just let her come back without incident. He took her hair in his hands and sniffed, and said that he would make sure she didn't have to be afraid of anything, so she wouldn't have to worry. He also said he'd give her someone she could count on to accompany her. Ariel wondered if Sally would go with her. After that, their conversation ended and Ariel went to bed. The next day was the same day of the tea party. Ariel traveled in the wagon to the manor. When they arrived, the girl got out of the wagon, and she was in a beautiful dress and had a beautiful hairdo. Looking around, the girl thought it was rather modest for an earl's estate. When suddenly her musings were interrupted by a maid who was getting out of the carriage, she told Ariel that she needed to stop looking around. She told Ariel to keep her eyes on the road because other people wouldn't stare at her so openly. She then went up to Ariel and told her that until she met her mistress of the evening inside, and until she introduced her to the others, the girl must behave like a fluttering butterfly in the garden. Then she asked if she remembered the greetings she'd learned. Ariel said she remembered everything. Clement told her he'd send someone she could count on. Obviously, she thought it would be Sally, but instead he sent Anna a maid from the servant's house. He said she could hide her clumsy manners or something like that. Anna told Lady Ariel that ladies in general shouldn't lean on their leg, and so on the way to the manor, Anna said all sorts of things to her. When they entered the manor, an old woman greeted them and said, "Welcome to the Limpton house. Lady Ariel." It was the Countess of Limpton herself. When Ariel wanted to ask who it was, Anna leaned over and said it was Countess Limpton. Then the girl bowed and thanked for the invitation, and said that she was Ariel of the House of Decius. She said she did not know anyone from high society, so Ariel truly thanked the Countess for her kindness. The Countess smiled and said there was no cause for concern. She wondered how to pay the Marquis Decius for his kindness, and this was a good opportunity to do so. After that, she told them to follow her, and she would introduce Ariel to the others. The girl said fine, but then suddenly, Anna came up to her and wanted to say something to her. The maid leaned into her ear and whispered that it was not appropriate for the maid to be near her when she was introduced, so she would be in Ariel's back room. Very surprised at the news. But Ariel didn't understand why Anna was even here. The maid left the room. The Countess came up to the girl and brought some woman with her. She introduced her as Ariel. Ariel. Ariel said hello to her, and the woman said she was such a nice, healthy young lady, and it's a pleasure to meet her. The Countess is still letting Ariel meet a lot of people. Ariel always says hello to them. She's being polite. At last got down to tea, and the girl thought her lips were going to cramp up. Countess Lamington introduced her to only a few people, but since she's the hostess at one point, Ariel was on her own. When she looked around, she saw some girls talking about her, and thought she must be becoming a topic of conversation. Where she came from, I had never heard of the Decius family having such a lady. If Decius hosted a dinner party afterward, we would be formally introduced. But in the Decius house with no Marquis, Ariel stood by and watched. She figured she could hear everything, and let them ask in person if they were so curious. Ariel can't even talk to them first because of all these rules I have to follow, lady. Suddenly some girl walked past her. She accidentally dropped her fan. Ariel, who saw all of this, thought she was almost certain that this girl had thrown it in her direction on purpose. Ariel doesn't know what the point of it is, but she must have to pick it up. When Ariel picked up the fan, she held it out to the girl and said that she had dropped it. The girl took it and said that was so kind of her. She then said that her name was Hilda, the eldest daughter of the House of Leonhardt. The girl said she wanted to thank Ariel properly and asked her what her name was. At that moment, Ariel remembered advanced etiquette. Chapter 3. Greeting someone by incredible coincidence. Now she understood why that girl had dropped the fan in front of her. She introduced herself and the girl said she was very happy to meet her so casually. Ariel laughed and said she was too. She thought that for some reason the name Leonhardt sounded so familiar. Hilda asked if she knew anyone here. Ariel replied that no. To her shame, she had to admit that this was the first time she had ever attended such an event. Hilda said that she was the first person to have the pleasure of exchanging names with her. Hilda asked if she could call her Ariel, then Ariel asked, it turns out she could just call her Hilda. The girl confirmed and said that it turns out that they now knew each other, and could she have the honor of introducing her to the others. She offered to socialize with everyone. From the moment Ariel thought this girl was just an angel that had come down from heaven. After a while, a lot of young people started coming into their hall. They had papers on their chests with something written on them. Hilda saw them, said they must be people starting to rehearse. She was really surprised and asked what they were practicing. Hilda said she had heard that it was a rehearsal for a charity play for which the Countess of Limpton was responsible. She believes that is the reason for this tea party. Then she asked if they should come closer and take a look. Ariel said of course they should. Then yes, we got closer and started to watch what was happening. At that moment, some guy came up to Ariel and asked if the weather was great today. Ariel was surprised and asked what he meant. The guy, not thinking long, said that he had heard that she had been in the capital recently and asked how she was settling in here, at which point he put a hand on her shoulder. Ariel thought she'd worked her ass off memorizing the rules of etiquette, and this scumbag with no manners or shame just walked up and started acting like that. So the girl immediately shoved his hand away. Hilda, seeing this, turned to Ariel and said that there were some great seats there, so we should go over to them. Ariel, of course, agreed. As they walked away, Hilda said she couldn't believe that someone like him had gotten into the tea party. It's just awful. Ariel replied that it's okay. Everyone is already looking at her anyway, but at least if someone came near her, she could chase them away. Hilda said that about that. A lot of people were curious about how she got the name Decius. Some suspected that she was the result of the Marquis's infidelity. Ariel was very surprised at this, and thought that someone must think she was adopted in a hurry for a scandalous reason. Perhaps they might think Ariel was an illegitimate child, that she had been cast out of the family because of her inheritance, and so on. Now she understood why those ladies were whispering behind her back. Hilda said that only a few people believe such rumors. No one would dare to suspect her of anything when they see her unwavering confidence. She is certain that there is no cause for concern. Ariel replied that she was fine. Besides, the girl had very easily saved her by talking first. If it wasn't for her, she would have had to deal with men who are only here to talk to the ladies. Ariel said like that man, for example, and pointed toward a guy who started hitting on one of the ladies. Looking closer, she realized it was William. She didn't understand why the idiot was at an event like this. At that moment, Hilda saw this guy and turned to him, calling him brother. Ariel was shocked when she heard this. Ariel now remembered Leonhardt was William's last name. Hilda went up to him and asked him what he was doing here. He said the order was taking part in an event. William said he had sent someone in his place, so she didn't have to worry about that. Ariel still couldn't get over the shock, and believed that the idiot was really Hilda's brother. But then suddenly William said to his sister that somehow or other, couldn't she introduce him to this beautiful lady? And at that moment, he looked at Ariel. The girl hoped he wasn't referring to her at all, but to some other lady. But at that moment he winked at her, trying to make a seductive face. Hilda asked where his manners were in general. The boy didn't understand and asked, "Why, isn't it fate that they met in a place like this?" Hilda countered by saying she was sorry. She then said that it was her brother William, the eldest son of the House of Leonhardt. Ariel said hello to him, and William took her hand and said he was very pleased to meet her and asked, "Can he hear her formal introduction?" Then the girl said her name was Ariel, and she was from the House of Decius. Ariel laughed awkwardly. William picked up her laughter and moved closer to her at that moment. He whispered, "Wow, it's really you. Apparently you found a good use for your newfound female body. You managed to fool me." Ariel grabbed his hand and told him she didn't think much of him, that he was a total jerk for not being able to recognize her when all she did was put on a wig. And then suddenly Hilda intervened and asked her brother how much longer he was going to hold her hand. Even if he found her charming, he couldn't do that. William told her not to say such terrible things. But then suddenly, Hilda was called out by one of the girls in the audience. She told Ariel that her friends were calling her and asked if she could leave for a while. Ariel replied that of course he could go, and Hilda told William not to be so impertinent. The boy immediately protested and said that he had never been impertinent. When Hilda left, Ariel asked in a whisper why he had avoided attending today's event. She had heard that the first prince would be there. William asked, "And this is what the man who is now pretending to be a lady is telling him?" Ariel replied, "So he doesn't deny that he did it on purpose, for a weakling." It was a bold move. William told the Aristite to shut up and go home because he was embarrassing him. Ariel asked, "And why is she embarrassing him?" William said he is embarrassed because she looks like a real lady. Ariel said that Sir William just confirmed that he came to this event to hit on the ladies. William said, of course, that's exactly why he's here. His term of service in the royal vine is coming to an end, and it's important to find a good match for him. Ariel was very surprised. She had thought William would deny everything. Then she asked if it was so important to find someone. He was the eldest son. Didn't that mean he was the heir? William said his father would not allow him to inherit the title unless he could continue their lineage. Doesn't she know that? Ariel replied that it was clear, and she was pleased to know it. William said he didn't know what she was up to there, but just have me grab something to eat and go, or charm a few good-looking men and rid him of his competition. Ariel thought that even if he was the only man here, she doubted the ladies would take well to him coming to a ladies' tea party. But then suddenly everyone heard a loud explosion. Panic immediately set in. People were talking. What was that? Was it some kind of theatrical effect? Or what? What happened out there? Ariel thought the strange sound came from where William had just gone. Then the girl decided to run to his aid. She ran out the door and shouted that she had just heard a loud sound, but as she looked out the window, she saw the building in sight on fire. She ran up to William and said, "That's the charcoal temple in the 7th district, the place where the initiation is being held today." Asking, "Yes, why is he clutching at his shirt like that?" Ariel asked, "Is that really all he cares about? The Order of the Royal Vine protecting the prince today?" She asked if he didn't need to hurry there. William was surprised, and said that he had told her that he had sent someone in his place, hadn't he? He made a deal with someone who was eager to fight. William said that it didn't seem like the Order of the Royal Vine would be of much help in actual combat. That man would be much more useful than him getting a curse like the girl because of his curiosity.